there's all these clips going around. I'm sure you've seen them all, where they'll go anywhere and they'll go to a Kamala rally and say, what's the biggest accomplishment as vice president? And they never have anything to say. And this guy, Duncan's his name, he said, what accomplishment has any vice president ever made, Mike? What accomplishment did Pence ever make? What accomplishment did Dan Quayle ever do? So you're holding Kamala to the standard of she never accomplished anything when vice presidents don't accomplish things. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd say first that that's not the first job she's ever had. And, I've played it, you've played it, this incredible clip from, I think it's the DNC in Chicago, where they ask a dozen people, what are her accomplishments? And they literally can't say anything. And they end up saying, well, she's a woman and she's colored. I mean, what, was this her first job? You can't even tell us anything in the last 30 years. She's 60 years old, and they can't tell us any accomplishments ever in California as AG, in San Francisco. This is maskirovka. This is distraction. This is just, gym crack. Don't talk to us about this issue because we don't want you to realize that she hasn't done anything at all for 30 years. Now, to the broader point, on paper, a vice president really doesn't have, much of a job. He goes to the funerals the president doesn't want to go to. But that can change and should change. I want J.D. Vance to be given a portfolio. We gave Mike Pence head of the National Space Council. So, you can give a vice president whatever the president wants to give him. I think I think J.D. should be in charge of the complete drainage of the swamp, reform of the CIA, the removal of the Office of Director of National Intelligence. A vice president has the job, which is defined by his boss. But the issue isn't what she did or didn't do as vice president, even though she was the border czar, The fact is she's been in politics, she's been in public service for 3 decades, and they still can't tell us what she's done, Mike.
A good point. What did Pence accomplish / tasked with?
I think nothing really significant unless you're a geek and you wear a NASA T-shirt, because he did bring us back from the insanity of the Obama years when NASA, and you guys maybe don't remember this and may not believe it, but this is exactly what Obama said. He said the priority of NASA is to improve relations with the Muslim community in the world. Well, we turned that around and we got it back to doing space exploration, working closer with people like Elon Musk. But at the end of the day, history will look very poorly on what Mike Pence did as vice president, because he betrayed his oath of office in Atlanta 48 hours before the January 6th reconciliation of the Electoral College votes. He spoke publicly at a rally and said that he would be sending back suspicious tallies to those states that hadn't done their due diligence in making sure that the Electoral College results were sound, which is his full right as the president of the Senate. And 2 days later, he caved and he was a coward and he refused to do what he promised to do just 2 days before. So when it comes to Mike Pence, that's the only thing he will be remembered for.
Isn't it wild that he ran for he wanted to be president?
Yeah.
Now? It's so bizarre that he tried to give it a go. Like, who told him that was a good idea?
We have a phrase in a Hungarian. These people are typified by the fact that they could commit suicide by jumping off their ego onto their IQ. And I mean, that is Mike Pence. I mean, the idea that a man who is detested as an empirical coward by tens of millions of Americans from the party he wishes to be the nominee of, that man thinks he could run for presidency. It's, stunning. I mean, this is why they call DC Hollywood for ugly people.
Okay, so I mentioned to this caller, so Kamala accomplishments. She was specifically tasked with a thing, as you mentioned, the border czar. And the Democrats come back and say, oh, she wasn't the border czar. She was in charge of discovering the root causes of immigration. So it's like, okay, well, what did she discover? And Duncan came back with a thing. It's like, oh, okay, these guys are on it. So this is from the White House, March 25th of this year. Vice President Harris announces public-private partnership has generated more than $5.2 billion in private sector commitments for Northern Central America. This will create economic opportunity and help address the root causes of migration in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. All right, so she was a part of, a public-private partnership with a bunch of companies and businesses in Central America. Isn't that something?
Well, no, because the word that you used, a commitment means nothing. Mike, I commit to running an ultramarathon. Does that make me a marathon runner? Means nothing, right? I've seen my son run a marathon. I will never in my life run a marathon, okay? But I can commit to it. It's just smoke and mirrors. It's just garbage. It's just propaganda. And the fact is, if she weren't in charge of the border, why did she have that fake visit to the border? Remember when she went to a DHS facility that was 20 miles from the border, from one of the most egregiously open sectors of the border, but she went to a building 20 miles from the border. If she's not in charge of the border, what was that visit about, Mike?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as Trump said in some interview, it's where you would want to bring your family for a picnic. Right. That's the part of the border that she went to, not the real part. Okay, I'll play the part of Duncan. Oh, Dr. Gorka. It takes time. Commitments take time. Meta has announced a 3-year commitment to train 250,000 youth entrepreneurs and small business owners in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras by July 2025. So these things just take time, but she started this initiative, and it just needs time to come to fruition. Right.
That's why her boss, on day one, right after the inauguration, shut down everything that we had done to secure the border. That's why there's this utterly infamous interview of Alejandro Mayorkas when he's asked, what have you done to change the regime on the border that President Trump put in place? And he, with that completely psychotic, rictus Joker-like grin, says, I can't tell you, I don't have long enough to tell you how many of the Trump-era regulations we've rescinded with regards to the border. That's not about 3-year timelines of commitment. It's things they did, just like with the XL Keystone Pipeline. The day he was inaugurated, Biden shut down the XL Keystone Pipeline extension. So I'm confused. Her work requires 3 years to implement, but her bosses happens immediately. Is that because she's a woman and she's colored that she can't get things done straight away? And it also goes to that, how delicious is it that she's such a brat and she's achieved so much in her life, but she can't do a canned interview unless the old white guy is sitting next to her to hold her hand? I mean, really, Tim Walz has to babysit her tomorrow because the brat can't give an interview by herself? Go, girl.
I decided about a month ago to not look up what brat means. So I don't fully understand what you just said right there, but I get the spirit of it.
Vibes.
I did look up Big Dad energy.
Look up vibes.
Okay, I got that. I got that idea. I just decided I don't want to know. I don't want to know what brat means.
It doesn't mean anything. It's a label that labels an empty box. I mean, your point is well taken. There is nothing there, so we've got to put it's like if you had a mean father at Christmas and he put this really cool bow on a box and put it under the tree, and you open the box and there's nothing in it. Brat is the bow on the empty box that is Kamala Harris, Mike.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me throw this one your way.
Yeah.
Last point that our caller made. Talking about the Afghanistan withdrawal from the other day. And he said, hey, did you know that Donald Trump released 50,000 Taliban prisoners, including the guy who's now running the Taliban? Now, I should have said this beforehand. Yesterday, the funny story was Politico. It's not funny, I guess, but Politico saying that J.D. Vance is trying to tether Kamala to Joe.
Yeah,
isn't that amazing?
That was great.
So The Hill did it again. The Hill went further today or yesterday. They said former President Trump sidesteps his role in Afghanistan exit in trying to link Vice President Harris to the chaos.
Yeah.
And of course, we played the clip of her saying that I was the last person in
And
the room. So she told
proud to be
herself.
the last person in the room.
Wow. Okay. So that being said, but Trump is to blame for something because he released 50,000 Taliban prisoners. What do we need to know about that deal that he made?
That it's a lie. I looked up that article, which is weird that didn't make it into the news. If he had released 50,000 prisoners, that would be on CNN and Morning Joe for the next 6 years. But it wasn't. That's so strange. I wonder why that is. And Amber Phillips, who wrote that piece, oh my God, giddy up. Thank you for ruining my day today, because I looked up Amber Phillips, who has no credentials in national security, but has an Instagram account with no followers, where she stares at the camera every day to give us a briefing and says, I'm a political reporter for the Washington Post. Hey, girl, when you've done it twice, you don't need to do it 30 more times, okay? It's a sign that you have an ego issue, all right? And you're compensating, especially when you do a little video recently about how Project 2025 is Christian nationalism. It's the Heritage Foundation's wish list of conservative policies. You're a propagandist prostitute for the Democrat Party. There was no such deal. I was involved in the national security negotiations for the future of Afghanistan. And the idea that President Trump, look, I give up. I've been asking my callers, Mike, and my listeners, gaslighting isn't adequate. I mean, it's like Spinal Tap with the amp that goes to 11. Gaslighting just is not adequate to describe what these people are doing. We need a new term. We are at North Korean levels of disinformation, of just the opposite of what is the truth. One person decided to surrender Afghanistan, and it wasn't my boss, because guess what? He wasn't the president. And there was no way we would have left the way he left. There would have been 1,500 special operations guys on the ground always with a small footprint to whack any HVT, any high-value target from Al-Qaeda, from ISIS, the ISIS-K, you name it, that would have threatened our interests in the region. We never would have sacrificed the only strategic airfield that can hold 17 C-130s that is within striking distance of the Chinese nuclear facility that threatens the whole world. This is, I mean, what kind of soulless individual covers up the death of 13 of our servicemen and women? I had Christy Shambrid on my show yesterday, the mother-in-law of that beautiful Sergeant Gee holding that Afghan baby who was murdered by ISIS, who said they have received, the families of the 13, Mike, despite trying to get something, just some explanation of why their child has to die at KIA, at Kabul International Airport, you know what they've received in the last 3 years? Each of them has received a form letter from the president 1 year after their son or daughter died. It took them a year to send them a cut-and-paste form letter. But Donald Trump is responsible? This is heinous.